And now for something completely different.
Humans do have an amazing capacity for believing what they choose.
I think before we go around killing people, we had better make dance here of our evidence.
They lied to you. It's time to learn the truth.
You can't handle the truth!
From what was once an inarticulate mass of lifeless tissues, may I now present a cultured, sophisticated man about town.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. This is Brad, and I'm joined by my good friend Tom, as always. And we're looking out Tom's beautiful window on the lake, and it's fall here
Yes, it is. Might be snowing tomorrow.
in northern Wisconsin. How are you, Tom?
I am doing just great. How are you tonight, Brad?
I'm doing very well. As always, we're trying out more technical stuff.
Yeah,
We
we'll.
both have mics, and
Do-
that's probably dangerous.
Yeah, do we sound like we're in a cave or something?
I don't know.
We'll. Somebody text us if somebody's listening and says, "Man, this doesn't sound right," or even if it sounds great, that would be helpful.
Well, hopefully, I won't put my eye out with this.
Yeah, it could happen. We've been known to do worse.
We have. What's new in your world? What are we gonna talk about tonight, Tom?
Oh, we're gonna talk
That's
about.
two questions, by the way.
Yeah. What's new? My family's visiting,
That's good.
so busy with all that and having a good time. But as far as show-related stuff, just a couple articles kind of caught my eye.
You think think there are people out there going, Tom's family's visiting?
Yeah, it's a long story. Just leave it. Let it go, Brad.
It's all for normal reasons.
Yeah.
In Tom's world.
Sort of normal, yeah. Depends on your definition of normal.
There is no definition of normal.
The things come up with the show, we should, hey, of course, always find us at facebook.com/annoyingpeasantradio.
Exactly.
We love to get comments there. Tell us where we're screwed up. Tell us where we're right on. All that kind of good stuff.
Absolutely. Find our catch our feed of newsworthy items and upcoming show topics and so forth.
Yeah, that was awesome. That's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is Tanya, of course, always does a wonderful job for us. And she put on three things that really caught my eye, and we're going to chat about those briefly tonight.
Good.
But I also have to remind everyone about AgoraFest coming up August 22nd to the 24th.
Okay.
And we're going to be broadcasting there live. We don't exactly know when, how, blah, blah, blah. We'll get that all figured out.
Yep.
But that should be way cool.
It's going to be very cool. And
Yeah.
we appreciate the invite, and we're looking forward to meeting all the folks down there.
Absolutely. That's going to be awesome because it's a wide array of people. There's different things going on.
As
And
I had described it to my friends that were wanting to make some plans that
That's right.
weekend, I was like, I'm going to meet some really interesting dudes.
yeah. So anyway, if anybody's interested in that, of course, you can learn about that on Facebook also. I think there's a page for AgoraFest.
Okay.
Check it out.
Cool.
With that, I think I wanted to talk about a couple posts that Tanya put up, if
Let's
that's
hear
all right. This one was a really cool one.
Wait, you're not going to offend people right off the bat, are you, Tom?
Of course I am. That's what the show is about.
Yes, fine. Good.
You know, we actually should do a real, at some point, an intro to the show that's, explains that, hey, we're a long-form conversation. Because I think a lot of people who haven't heard us before will be thinking, hey, this is going to be like a normal radio show. Well, it's anything but.
There's the word again.
Yeah.
And there's the air quotes.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of interesting that I think we are a bit of a different form.
We intend to be.
And, of course, the topic is seen as controversial, I think, by many people.
Yes.
Or out there, or
I
however
think
you want.
people would call us non-mainstream.
Yeah.
I think we're neither, as we are so devout and so much enjoy, we're neither left or right,
Yes.
which that
Freak.
leaves us in the lurch by a mile.
Yes, it does. It freaks people out.
It does.
What do you mean?
Either you're on my team or you're not on my team.
Blue or red, man. There's no purple.
In this world, that's right.
So I think it's interesting if, as we pick up more listeners, that we should probably go back and explain that we're not the radio professionals that we, most people think we are, of course.
Yeah, by all standards.
But we're really just kind of pulling the wool over your eyes here because we are very sophisticated. But we'll do that here in the very near future. We like a show reset kind of let people understand it. And we maybe should come up with some kind of intro that kind of very briefly goes into that so people kind of know what they're going to get into when they start listening to our show.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay.
But in the meantime, just to be fair, we're not going to dive all into that, but this is a show about liberty.
Yes.
Right?
And I think one of the things that you've brought up numerous times that I think is extremely important, a lot of people might go, okay, so what's the big deal? We all know what that is.
Yep.
Okay, what's to talk about then?
Right.
And I think there's a lot to talk about. I mean, besides answering that question directly, I mean, it affects every phase of life, of society, of social order or disorder. So you can literally talk about anything. So that makes the show kind of fun to do.
And in our little pre-show chat, you even said, in my evolution of understanding this, that you're seeing it more everywhere, and it's everywhere. The contradictions to liberty are immense. They're overwhelming. To perceived
liberty, right? Or people think this is and you now can readily see that, wait, either this is an issue, in other words, it is a violation of somebody's property rights, or they're proposing to do so or whatever, or, well, it's not a violation of anybody's property. What's the problem with this? Okay, he likes different colored cars than me. That's not a problem.
Right.
It doesn't violate anybody's property right. But some people want to make a big deal out of it.
But when it's not cars, then people start getting a little jacked up.
Absolutely. I was being absurd with the car.
But that's really as benign as I think it should be. Many of these positions that people are taking in the news all the time, and personally in breakfast conversations and lunch conversations or whatever, they've been out of shape over things that don't pertain to them, period.
Yes. I mean, and I believe people should, and they do, in fact, by nature, have the right to get bent out of shape about anything they want.
We get bent out of shape.
That's fine. The point is, it has no impact or influence on a system of justice, which is really the libertarian question and the libertarian answers buried in there afterwards somewhere. But I think that's a big part of the interest of the show, or all the different angles, and you can come at this topic from a variety of different ways too. That's also interesting. So if I come at it from one angle and Brad or a caller or somebody says, well, really this is a big issue or a bigger issue or a better way of attacking that, I'm like, dang, that's right, that's cool, that's the better way to attack that issue. And that's, for me, that makes it interesting and makes it fun. And also seeing Brad's, I'll call it development. I don't know what he would call it. Evolution. It's just fun to see that someone who... Brad was never a guy who was overt almost about anything other than he's a strong supporter of civil discourse, right? That, I think, was his main thrust, which I think is great because it's also, I would argue, in concert with liberty.
Should we explain what civil discourse means? Because it makes it sound like but I was one for civil discussion. I enjoy immensely other people's views.
Absolutely. And the way in which you go about that is to do it civilly, peacefully, respectfully, right? Because I would argue, if you don't go about it that way, nobody learns anything. There's really no exchange. There's just, two people yelling at each other. They don't hear what the other person's saying.
I'm not the guy that says, oh, that dude's got on blue shoes, we're going to blow up his house.
Right.
That's never been that way. I always like, wow, wonder why he'd wear blue shoes like that.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I can learn something by chatting with him about that.
Yeah, I wonder
about blue shoes.
Right. Wonder why he's wearing them.
Right.
What was his thought process?
Right. And that's always been my way. My friends have always been actually over time annoyed with my inquisitive curiosity about certain things.
Well, I think it's a great curiosity to have because now you have the potential to learn something.
And that's always been the point. As a result of these conversations, like, wow, I would have never thought of it that way.
Right.
Or sometimes as a result of these conversations, I've walked away and gone, they had no reason, and then they had no reason.
I didn't think they did beforehand, and now I'm sure they don't.
Right.
After talking to them.
But we're being trite about blue shoes. We're being trite about the discourse part. But if you look at our country, you read the news, the them and us.
Yes.
We've got big problems.
Absolutely. We're going to cite later a story by Ariana Huffington on the drug war and her solution to the whole drug deal. It's always interesting to me how people go about it and things that they see. Which I got to add one more thing before. So when people first listen to us, one thing that Bradzel is big on mentioning, and I'm going to beat him to the punch here, is one of the things about our shtick, where we're going with this, what we think is it's all about peaceful. People, when they hear me especially say things that the state is bad because it's an aggressor, etc.,
Yep.
They think, all right, when we got to pick up guns, we got to start shooting people. That's exactly what we don't do.
Absolutely not.
Right? It's completely peaceful. Anything that involves violence, and again, unless it's the use of defensive force, that's a whole long discussion, would not be sanctioned by any true supporter of freedom.
Agreed.
So,
and in the end, and we'll wrap this little segment up, we hope we make you think. That's always our objective. We're not trying to get you to drink the Kool-Aid necessarily, to use a bad, very tasteless pun.
Right.
But we are hoping that we will make you think. And thousands of times in my life, I've listened to other people talk or other shows or whatever, and taken many things from it, including a galvanization, as I call it, of why I believe something, why I thought something was the preferred way or the best way or the fairest way, or maybe I walked away and going, I guess I never saw it from that perspective before.
Right.
And we're hoping that we can present a different perspective.
Yeah, so think. And ultimately, when we get our technology all working properly, the idea is this will be more of an exchange of ideas. We want to be much more interactive with our audience. We haven't sort of been unable to so far just because of our problem on our end. But we definitely like to do that, get really fluent in the chat room, which we were prior at another location. But we got to get that going, and we got to get the conversation going with our audience.
Agreed. So in the meantime, let's do it via the World Wide Web, and find us on Facebook, and let us know what your thoughts are, you think. Annoying Peasant Radio on Facebook.com.
Yes. So, hey.
Here we go. So what are we going to talk about now?
Yeah, again, thanks to Tanya for doing this. She always does such a wonderful job. I just want to quickly go over a few things she put up there, but I think there's relevance to the stories that we're going to discuss later in the show, so I think it's also important. But it obviously makes a great, all three of these items make a great point all unto themselves. This is I'm going to say, Tanya got this from the Non-Aggression Principle Against Abortion, NAPAA's status. I don't even know that site. Obviously, Tanya knows stuff. But it's just here's the conversation. It says, me. Why hasn't the Constitution been able to keep government in check? And the other person is a statist, is designated. So it says, because we haven't been vigilant enough in ensuring the government follows it. Right? So the government is not remaining in check by the Constitution. Why? Because the people haven't been vigilant enough in making that happen. So me says, so we need to govern those who are supposed to govern us. If we're capable of governing them, then why can't we just govern ourselves without them? Which I think is a good point. We've created this monster to manage, and now we got to manage it, and we're mismanaging it. Some people think, other people think we're managing it just fine. It depends on your perspective, of course. But it does point out the absurdity, I think, of the state. And I think it's helpful. Again, we'll drive that one home maybe a little bit later. Where's the next one? It's coming up here. Yeah, I think this is a really good one. It's entitled
by the way, these are all on our Facebook page. So
yeah.
You can go check it out.
So visit that. This one's entitled Democracy Explained. And I just think this, I think it's from Free Talk Live is where it came from. But I can't tell you how many times that I've been in conversations with, I would call them statists, and say, well, if you don't like it, if you're unhappy here, if you think it's wrong, why don't you just get the hell out? Okay? And I think this kind of alludes to how someone maybe in my shoes kind of feels about this. There's what I think it was at a party, and this guy is returning to the party, and he says, "You guys ordered pizza?" And the answer is from someone at the party, says, "Yeah, we put it to a vote while you were pissing and decided that we all want a pizza. You owe us $5. So he says, "But I don't even want pizza." He says, "You implicitly agreed to buy pizza by being at the party. Pay your fair share or we'll lock you in the closet." Which I think points out to the absurdity of the state and the notion of the legitimacy of the state. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I get it. The state is here. It's probably represented by a larger plurality, if not a majority of people, but that doesn't make it morally correct, right? And that's what this points to, that you owe us pizza. Well, he never consented to paying for pizza. He never even wanted the pizza, right? Yet he's the one who's being threatened with being locked in the closet, right? Where my discussions with people usually it's, hey, get out of the country, or we should just throw you in jail. And I think that's a good way people can relate to that one pretty well. And then there's a Stefan Molyneux. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think it points to a lot of things. And even Brad has been here, and that's why I thought it was relevant and interesting. It's, I don't know, kind of a 2-paragraph thing. I'm just going to quickly read over the second paragraph. We'll see how good my eyeglasses are going. This is kind of small. He says, people say, well, how is this going to work in a free society? Which is just a way of avoiding the moral issue about whether it's right or wrong to grant individuals the right and obligation to initiate the use of force over others. Of course it's wrong. Of course it's wrong. We all know that it's wrong. So just deal with the moral issue. Slavery is wrong. I think this is a good point. He says slavery is wrong. It doesn't matter who picks cotton after we end slavery. Slavery must be ended because slavery is immoral. And that was part of our conversation a lot of times. Well, hey, the marketplace will work out a lot of these things. So when people say, I don't know, what will cell phones look like if we flip the switch right now and we have a free society? And the real answer is, I don't know. And beyond that, nobody knows. Just as we don't know what cell phones are going to look like in the state of society in 3 years and 5 years and 50 years, right? But for most people, that's not a big cause for uncertainty or apprehension, right? They just think, well, they'll be whatever they'll be, I guess.
Right.
That's the same answer for a free society. If the marketplace demands a more sophisticated cell phone with more features, etc., it'll likely come as technology becomes available to do so. If the marketplace is really not interested in that and it's interested in some other mode of transportation, then that's where resources will be diverted through the price system, and then likely that will be improved in a much bigger way than cell phone technology.
It will sort itself out.
Yes, and people are scared of that answer.
And I will tell you that for a long time, I was right there with them. I'd be like, well, wait a minute. We've got to have regulators that are going to help guide us and everything else. And it's actually just the contrary.
Right.
It needs to be, we don't need regulators to overregulate, because they're imposing somebody else's desires, somebody else's wishes to create those regulations that we all then have to adhere to by law.
Yeah, and how do we know, even if they don't have, I don't know, sinister incentives, let's just leave it at that for the moment, they can't possibly have the knowledge to do this properly. It's the marketplace through the price system that will tell us things that are, a high price tells you either that it's in extremely high demand or the supply is reduced or incapable of being increased, right? The point is that little number on the package of the thing you buy actually conveys a lot of information, and very quickly. I wrote something a while back about that, how one of the things that had come up is gouging, and anybody who's on the gouged end feels slighted, upset, frustrated. I don't know all the words that go in there. But think about if if Home Depot, in the case of a hurricane, Home Depot has their routine distribution, I don't know, 30% of stuff goes to the East Coast, 30% goes to the West Coast, and 40% goes to the central United States. When there's a hurricane on the East Coast, if the prices of plywood don't go higher, they have no incentive to move more plywood east. Why would we change everything, which incurs cost on our part, to do this? For what? For the same sales price, which means ultimately our margins are reduced
or lost.
Yes. So the way that tells them, hey, you better change your distribution system right now is, holy cow, plywood was $10 a sheet. It's now going for $20. They'll divert all the resources they possibly can there and in a quick order as they can. Now, I know people feel like they're being ripped off, but it's the price system actually working. If you had a free market all the time, which we don't, ultimately we would all be paying less for everything. It's a long story, and I don't intend this to be a full description of that, but just some examples.
That's good.
Okay. Do we want to move on to our first story?
You're not going to do the Bill Cosby one?
Do it. You do it.
Okay, so it's a picture of Bill Cosby. I'm assuming that this is a quote, but he says, "You vote to violently control me by way of government." And then at the bottom it says, I oppose your violence, and I'm the one that should leave?
Yes.
To your point earlier.
Yes, exactly. I've been there many times.
Yep.
That was one of the things I was reading. One of my heroes, Lysander Spooner, and he wrote something. Actually, I think I can find it in short order here. Just a very short quip about.
Well, Tom looks at that. I just remind everybody that this is the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. Appreciate you joining us. We broadcast live every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time these days.
God darn it! It was here. What is it? I'm going to just read because I don't know if I'm reading exactly the right part. Oh, here it is. Actually, by sheer accident, this is the part I wanted to quote. He says, law, therefore, is an intelligible principle of right, necessarily resulting from the nature of man, and not an arbitrary rule that can be established by mere will, numbers, or power. Think about that. I think that most people don't. I think that's new to them. It's like, well, of course, dude, you don't understand how we make laws. See, we vote for guys. They sit in a room. They write some stuff. It gets blessed by the Congress in general. The president signs it, and that's the way we do it, man. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point. Just because you can get either the right people, which is those who have the authority or power, or the numbers, or even if they just have the will to do it, that does not make it rooted in man's nature, or I'll just very quick use the word right. Brad has said many times on this show, might does not make right. That's one of your things I think you really enjoy about this. Yep. And people don't stop to think about that for a second. And I always use the same tired example because I'm not real smart, the whole deal. We get together and get enough votes to take Bill Gates' money. Mm-hmm. Does it make it right?
Yep.
No. That's our system. Yes, I get that. That's our system, but I'm pointing out the fallacies in the system.
Right. And then the other understanding is that if my team, the left or the right or whichever side I'm on, doesn't win out in that particular vote or that particular representative, then we huddle back up until we can hopefully get that through and basically overpower those that are for the opposition.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you at first you fail, try again, right? You regroup, you use a new tactic or something, and you eventually get it through. And that's the other thing because of I think,
or you abandon it.
Yeah, or you abandon it. And usually these things that are pushing us to, I don't like to use the word, but more socialism, they eventually do get through. It's just, the old adage, how do you boil a frog? you turn up the temperature slowly, because if you dropped him in hot water, he would jump right out, right? And that's because of the apathy of the public, which is just a perfect segue into getting into our next.
Let's go.
And this topic I actually put on the Facebook page, so if anybody has interest, you can find the link there. But it's not so much the apathy that gets pointed out in this story that we're going to talk about here in a second. For me, the most interesting thing is this was on mainstream media. This was on the USA Today. This doesn't come from some libertarian website, some anarcho-capitalist spouting off about how the state is using aggressive force against people, and other people just, they're whatever that guy's problem is, right? This is on mainstream media. And for me, that's the most significant thing about this. So if you get a chance, again, check it out and make sure check me to make sure I'm doing this correctly. Anyway, I just wanted to say this is the title of this was How the TSA Beat Flyers into Submission. It was written by Christopher Elliott yesterday, the 28th.
It appeared in USA Today's where we found it, and it might have been other places, but it was in USA Today.
Yeah, really cool. And he talks about a number of things, but I'm going to just read part of it so you get really kind of overall flavor. There's a quote from a gal, Pam Miller. She says, "I'm tired of complaining," says Pam Miller, a frequent flyer based in Seattle. "It's an ineffective use of time and energy." Many libertarians have argued using the state to correct the errors in the state is, in fact, an inefficient use of time and energy. So I really like that quote.
Go ahead. Finish, and I'm going to jump in front of the bus here.
Okay. He writes, consider PreCheck, a system that's being deployed at America's airports with dizzying speed. Not a week seems to go by that the TSA doesn't issue a press release on its new Trusted Traveler program. Problem is, there's nothing trusted about the program. His words, not mine, which costs $85 to join. Screeners often randomly upgrade non-PreCheck passengers into the shorter lines using a tablet computer with a mysterious randomizer application. Passengers sent to a PreCheck line don't have to remove their shoes or laptops or submit to a dreaded full-body scan. A respectful screening ought to be included in the price of every airline ticket, of course. But this summer, the complaints about the uneven and unfair implementation of PreCheck are indifferent at best. And again, that's what I think is the real crux of the story. "I always feel like the treatment I receive is completely arbitrary," says Sarah Shopkow, an editor based in Oakland. "Frankly, I'd rather just walk through the checkpoints naked. It would be much less humiliating." And by the way, that's my concept for a new airline, all naked airways, but that comes after this here in a second.
There's every other kind of naked show on the air right now, so why not naked airlines?
Passengers also reacted with a collective shrug when in early July, the Department of Homeland Security announced new enhanced security measures at certain overseas airports with direct flights to the U.S. In case you missed it, the new precautions ask passengers to power up their electronic devices. If they couldn't, the powerless gadgets would not be permitted on the aircraft. Ooh, how convenient that would be, huh?
Yeah.
The TSA doesn't administer these screenings, but it has some oversight. I'm gonna skip down here. If the preposterous PreCheck program and the no-fly rule for certain electronics isn't enough to spark outrage among the flying public, then surely the latest headlines are. How about the guy who managed... Did you hear this? I did not hear this originally. How about the guy who managed to drunkenly pose? So the dude is drunk. Just remember that. He drunkenly posed as a TSA agent at San Francisco International and is alleged to have groped at least 2 women. Or the TSA agent at my hometown airport, Orlando, again, this is the author, not me speaking here, who rejected a passenger's Washington, D.C. driver's license and demanded to see a passport. Why? Because he'd never heard of the District of Columbia. All right, and I just want to, and then we're going to get into the financial thing just for a second here. Still not steamed? Then consider this. A few weeks ago, the TSA's September 11th security fee more than doubled from $250 each way for nonstop flights to $560. On flights with layovers longer than 4 hours, the government stipulated that each leg is charged $560. Unbelievably, the money is not all going to airport security. Of the $36.5 billion the TSA expects to collect in fees over the next decade, $12.63 billion will go to the U.S. Treasury's general fund. The reaction from the flying public? Yawn. And I think, again, I think that's the real story here. But I don't know, something that caught your eye in there, Brad.
Well, I think that people that are listening are going, some could be going, okay, wait a minute, who are these guys daring to, this is a government looking out for us to protect us from the bad guys.
Yeah, let me speak to that for 1 second, just from his own story.
Would we not rather, are these guys? Would these guys encourage that they just want to get on with all the bombers, and have them blow things up?
I'm trying to find. I think it's in this article. He says that the TSA has not caught one terrorist.
It does say that in some place in the article.
It is in there somewhere. I can't find it at the moment. But yeah, so that would be the first thing.
That we know of, first of all.
Correct. That's a good thing to point out. People say, well, they might have caught thousands and they're not telling us, because then their tools that they use would be divulged, and then they would the terrorists would readjust.
Weapons of mass destruction, somewhere.
On the other hand, wouldn't they tout that as a wonderful PR victory?
Wouldn't you think?
Yeah. So it's not entirely clear. People will use one side of that issue to say, well, this is why they're not divulging. But come on. If the especially the White House is not about using the media, I call it propaganda, but using the media to its advantage, I mean, what else is going on in there? I mean, come on, they do that for everything. And again, just as a segue, don't let me think I'm picking on the current holder of the White House office. It doesn't matter who's in there to me. It's all the same game.
Right.
All right. Was there anything else in there that particularly caught your eye, Brad? I just thought.
Well, are we going to talk about the financial part of this?
Yeah, the broad perspective on this is my view is they're trying to take your money. Shocker. That's what they're up to here, Brad. Can you believe that?
No, it's not a surprise. But I think that this is a good example of how it starts one way as something that seems necessary and actually potentially innocent or benign.
Yes.
In this case, I always talk about the needle and the needle overreacting and then recalibrating. And so as a result of 9/11, the needle went tilt.
Yes.
Toward safety. And I think that this seemed like a logical thing. Well, we got to do something to prevent this from happening. And so what do? And now it's going on and on and on and on. And I'm not, Tom and I have this discussion frequently where it's like, well, Tom, what do you think? Are you saying we don't need pre-screening? We don't need this? We don't need that? And that's not what we're saying at all, per se.
Naked airways is the answer.
Naked airways. But there are those body cavities.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
I've been watching too much Breaking Bad.
Yeah, you got to bring that. We'll bring that up later here.
But so your take, though, is always, I found it to be very interesting. It's like, the free market would decide, and we don't need the government to intervene in this. Because if we're going to go fly on Joe Blow Airlines, and Joe Blow Airlines is known to not be safe.
Hey, call them no security airlines.
Right.
We check nobody.
Right.
Right? And if nobody purchases a ticket, or very few, that means they made an error in assessing the management of no security airways, made an error in assuming what the market demand was. They go out of business. They go bankrupt. They're out of business. They're gone.
Right.
There's no harm there. They make an error. They pay a price for making an error. They go out of business. They go bankrupt. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's not the case specifically with almost any government agency. When they make an error, they say, hey, we have additional costs incurred. We're going to have to take more money from you, to pay for this. Right? It's the opposite of the free market. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there could be in the airways, the security thing, there'd be all security airways. I don't know all the possible things they could do, but we do essentially everything humanly possible.
Right.
Your ticket is $8 million.
Right.
and then let the market speak. And the answer will likely be, I can't tell you what the answer, only the marketplace can tell you what the answer will be. I'm just assuming it's probably going to be some level of security, and people will accept some level of risk in order to make it more affordable, right? When people say you can't measure these things in dollars, and you're absolutely right, I can't, but the marketplace can. They determine what the price is, not me. That's the beauty of the marketplace, is that no single individual has control over it. No single supplier would have control over it. And people say, oh, yeah, there's big conglomerates all the time, and they have control over it. I argue they're created because of the state. That wouldn't happen in a free society.
So in your previous example,
yes,
if we had no security airlines,
yes,
or naked airlines, and
I like naked, just
that's fine. Think all you want.
I'm a marketing genius. That's why, Brad.
Think all you want. And then you had superior security. You had exponential security airlines.
Yes.
And let's go back to your hurricane and the free market and the plywood scenario. So a hurricane or an airline, we have a disaster,
right,
that happens on naked airlines.
Yes.
What is likely to occur? People might go, wow, I got to go from A to B. Naked airlines didn't have very good security.
Right.
I'm not going with them anymore. I'm going to pay the higher price and go to exponential airlines.
That's not to mention that the potential problem you have is when you have a business meeting on the other end. What do you do with naked airlines?
What do you mean other end, Tom?
I don't know. You get there, it might not be too fun having no clothes, but yeah, the whole point is the market will work that out. And it's I don't have a perfect analogy because we have a status system now, but I would point you to think about Malaysia Airlines. I don't even know their financial situation. I don't know their revenue situation. I haven't been studying since I'll call it the original. I don't know if it's the original, but the loss of that 777 over the Indian Ocean or wherever exactly, China, wherever it got lost. I assume their ridership is down just because of that. Well, now they lost the one over Ukraine.
The latest headlines I read about theirs was that they're thinking about changing names.
There you go. That's one way to try to combat it.
And we're not making light of disaster situations.
Absolutely not.
But we are looking at it. I mean, I'm guessing that there's alternatives in their marketplace, or there's opportunity for alternatives in their marketplace.
Certainly.
To provide an alternate service,
right?
As opposed to what they are offered or how they are having a bad run for sure.
And one of the things to point out that my analogy isn't perfect for sure, maybe you could argue it's not even good, is because I believe Malaysia is 50% owned by the government of Malaysia.
Yes.
Or thereabouts, right? So obviously they have more staying power because we just increase taxation to the public so we can afford these losses for a much longer time than likely a private enterprise could. So thus limiting the possibility of new players coming in, because Malaysia Airlines as we know it, as long as they keep hanging around, there's the chance is reduced of new players coming in.
Because of subsidization.
Exactly. The government's paying for this game.
Yep.
Whereas if it were truly a private enterprise, again, I don't know what their sustainability is or their power to withhold from this stuff, but likely they would go out in shorter order if in fact they do go out.
And competition may not be economically feasible, but the free market will decide that.
Yes. Well, and and I'm a little off topic, which I always do, is people say, well, yeah, just leave it up to, survival of the fittest. Leave it up to the jungle to decide. That's a very poor characterization, I would argue, and I just want to combat that for a second, is what is the free market? It's a summary of voluntary exchanges. In other words, there's no introduction of aggression against anyone in that, right? We've talked about the simple, hey, I want your pencil for my dollar, right? We've gone through that many times. Mm-hmm. If you have a regulated market, you inject some of this, at least some, if not a lot, of aggressiveness into the marketplace. Or in other words, you initiate violence against innocent people, right? And
that's a big skip there. Let's stop there for a second.
Okay.
We were talking about free markets.
Right.
Free markets, and all of a sudden now we're aggressing against other people.
And that's what
How are we aggressing?
The regulation is basically says, oh, I'll give you, again, maybe an out there examples. I want to sell Brad some pot. Okay? He wants to buy the pot. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have connected on this back alley at night. Right?
This is a great example, Tom.
Yeah.
Way to go.
But the good news is I'm selling it to you in this example.
Yeah.
So everybody knows now you're a pot user.
Let's continue to isolate as many listeners as we possibly can.
There you go.
With our examples.
But right, if you want the pot, I want to sell the pot for the amount that we contemplate. Why can't we do that? Right? What happens is the street cop with the badge happens to walk around the corner in the dark alley and see us, and he's basically says, "Hey, you guys can't make this transaction." And the question is, actually, why can't we? And people are sitting there and say, "Hey, dummy, because it's against the law. Don't you know anything?" Yes, I get that part. But if you think, I'm asking more philosophically, why would such an exchange be against the law? Why would a voluntary exchange be against the law? It's voluntary, right? And I know people say, well, hey, idiot, you don't also understand that it's not good for Brad to engage in this behavior. Well, that makes me move to vices are not crimes from Lysander Spooner. So I got to first put my glass on because I think he can say it, of course, way better than I can. And this also pertains to the story, the next one we were going to do about the drug thing. But since I can't help myself, I got to read this. And I want people to think about this. This is written like 1850. That's not the exact date, but 150, working on 200 years ago. This guy was brilliant in my view. Lysander Spooner. This topic is entitled "Vices Are Not Crimes." But check this out, and I'm only going to read a few lines. Vices are those acts by which a man harms himself or his property. Okay, so if you have a vice, I don't know, you drink too much, you smoke pot, you're hurting yourself. And hang on with I get where people are going to go right away. Okay. Crimes are those acts by which one man harms the person or property of another, right? So I think it's a great distinction. And he would go on, he says, vices are simply the errors which a man makes in his search after his own happiness. Unlike crimes, they imply no malice toward others and no interference with their persons or property. And again, it's the property rights issue that is the deal there, and we will delve into that in probably in another few shows. Okay. But that's the big difference. So there's no problem with vices. There's problems with crimes. Why? Because one involves the violation of property rights, the other does not.
Okay.
Anyway, so the reason we would contemplate an exchange of $10 for some pot is because you ultimately believe that you're better off to have the pot than the $10, and I believe I'm better off to have the $10 than the pot. The point is wealth is created through that exchange. And think of it in a different way. People sometimes struggle with that. I go to an auto mechanic. Why? Because the auto mechanic is much more efficient at taking care of those things than I am. And theoretically, I'm more efficient at my job, right? So the whole point is the whole system is more efficient if we engage in those exchanges. If we don't engage in those exchanges, we can't take advantage of specialization, right, of people's talents. Okay. Same point, everybody says, well, everybody's a unique individual. Yes, that's one of the ways that you can, society can take advantage of that uniqueness of individuals, right? They're more efficient. They're better at things. Lord knows almost anybody can draw better than I can draw. I need to hire somebody if I need to have something drawn.
Sure.
Okay, so wealth is actually created by that process. The only alternative to that is where I was speaking about regulators. I would call it the injection of coercion. Is let's assume the same transaction that Brad and I are contemplating, he doesn't really want to do it. I say, Brad, here's the deal. This is some good stuff. And he says, nah, okay, I don't really want to do it. Here's how I changed the game. I put a gun to his head. And I said, here's the deal, Brad. Make the exchange now or I shoot you. Okay, so now he makes the exchange that he would not voluntarily make. So therefore, necessarily, wealth is destroyed by that type of exchange. And I think when you advance a little further, when people really contemplate this heavily, that's actually what the state does. They use coercion.
Draw the correlation.
Yeah, for taxation, regulation, etc. All these things. So they are actually this. And Mises has said this. I'm not smart enough to come up with these around. He said the state is the destroyer of wealth, not the creator of wealth. And I get it. People say, "Well, wait a minute. They created the bridge that I go over every day to work. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to do it." And that is true at the moment. Without them, you wouldn't have been able to do it. I would argue, even if roads would be as big an issue in a free society as they are now, because roads have been subsidized, it's a whole long, convoluted argument. Right. It would have been done more efficiently in a free society, because all I'm advocating is, why don't we just get rid of the destroyers of wealth in society? I say we will necessarily be wealthier as a result. That's the simple argument, maybe more the moral argument. And I realize a lot of people won't accept that. They want to see concrete examples, etc., but those will come.
Okay, there's a lot there.
What about the roads?
What about the roads?
Yeah.
You say that the roads are the most fair tax there is.
Well, gasoline tax.
Because of, yes.
I see it more as a fee for the use of the road. Now, I know it's been convoluted and money is either coming from there and going to the general fund or the general fund. It gets such a mess in a half a second. That's why you don't entrust somebody with that authority in the first place. But given the situation, that's probably as close as you. Anything that's really a user fee, I'm okay. You use it, you need to pay for it.
You
likely
don't use it, you don't
you
pay for it.
Right. But that's the best way to allocate resources, in my view.
We always talk about if you're presented with your tax bill at the end of the year or in April or whenever it hits you, first of the year, and you could a la carte it like you do a nice restaurant or a cafeteria.
Yes.
Would you have the green beans or not have the green beans?
There'd be some impetus for a change right there.
There would be.
In short order, yeah. I would argue.
Big change.
Okay, anything else about the TSA that
I think it's an
excites you?
Story, and you can check it out on our Facebook page.
All right, now we're going to move on to. We're actually, as weird as this is going to seem, we're kind of staying with the same vein, but we're going to go on to a Huffington Post article written by Ariana herself. It's entitled, "This is Your Brain on Legal Drugs. Let's End the Drug War with a Minimum of Casualties by Following the Science." And Brad and I chatted about this one a little before the show. And I'm like, hey, I'm not opposed to, following science. That's not the issue. I think a lot of people, if they disagree with me here, they're going to pick on that and say, oh, the dude thinks we should do things on a whim. No, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm just going to read the first short bit, so you will get the basic flavor of the whole story. She started. By the way, it was authored today, and again, it's on the Huffington Post. We'll post it on our Facebook page, so you can check that out.
I'm looking for it, Tom, and I'm not seeing it.
Well, I don't know what. It might be on the front page if you look down on the left on the Huffington Post.
Okay.
And on the left, Ariana usually has an article there if she has one. So, but here we go. Human beings sometimes have a troubling inability to hold two thoughts in mind at the same time. This is true not only when the two thoughts contradict each other, but even when they simply appear to be in conflict with each other, but actually aren't. That's a lot of the things that I think in liberty in general that we have that issue. And nowhere is there a greater need for us to get past this tendency than when discussing the ongoing war on drugs and the growing movement for the decriminalization of marijuana. It should be possible to say both that, and she lists two things here. So here's number one. The drug war is an all-out disaster that has inflicted an untold amount of unnecessary human suffering. Therefore, as a first step toward ending this failed war, we should continue with the movement toward the decriminalization of pot. I actually like her choice of word there on decriminalization. We'll get to that in a second. And number two, she says, there is scientific evidence of the dangers of pot on the development of adolescent brains and for users of any age who end up abusing the drug. So as we decriminalize, we should take every step possible to minimize the harm. There's a number of things that this is like almost every story for me. There's a number of things that I can agree with. And when I say I can agree with, that's a poor characterization. I'd say a number of items that she has in there that are in concert with freedom.
Sure.
And there's a number of things where she supports tyranny. and that's makes it kind of fun to parse these stories, but also makes it difficult, again, given the backdrop that we're in a statist system to begin with.
Right.
Did you find it, by the way?
I did.
Sweet. I had a couple points that I just want to make, and these are her points, again, that the drug war is a disaster, and she says she advocates to continue to decriminalize pot, and we have to minimize the harm that pot can inflict. Well, again, I would argue for a second, well, there's no different with that with alcohol and a lot of other things, right? You try to be safer. That's not such a big deal. But she goes on to say that, essentially she advocates we work within the system to better our lives. Let me just give a little aside. I'm not on anybody's case who's trying to eke out more freedom, basically whichever strategy they choose. I mean, personally, this is just the Tom thing, is I don't think it's a good use of your time and resources. Was a gal that we cited in the previous article that she's tired of it, and she says it's an inefficient use of my time and my energy, basically. Mm-hmm. I happen to agree with that statement. A lot of people don't. Right, you have to work within the system. My argument there is, hey, you want to change the mafia because you think they're a little too brutal? How many people say, well, so I'm going to join them, I'm going to get to the head of the mafia, and then I'm going to say, here's the due deals. I think we're just a little too mean. We're going to tone it down. Yeah.
86 the brass knuckles and use your bare hands.
Yeah, bare hands. We're feathers. We're going to tickle people. That's how we're going to do it now. I got a feeling you're not going to be Mr. Mafioso very long.
Keep getting your cuts,
yeah.
but use feathers.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think it denies, in some sense, the nature of the organization to begin with. But again, that's just a me thing. I would argue the same with the state, again, is my point. I think the way to argue these things is with a coherent political philosophy, not necessarily with science. And in general, science is a good thing, except for there are some dangers with science. Have you ever heard that, salt is no good, then salt is okay, and then salt is no good, and salt is okay, and right? Because our understanding continually changes. And just use that as a backdrop when you hear these snippets. What I hear today, something like running, it makes you 30% less
likely to
keel over and die.
Right.
It's the short way of doing it, right? So you want to go, everybody should be running. Well, and then the next report will be, it messes up.
Well, distance runners actually die sooner.
Right.
That's the last one I read.
And your knees, be careful because your knees are going to give out, and all the pounding your body takes, etc.
You'll live, but you can't walk.
Exactly. You'll be in a wheelchair.
That's right.
You'll be like Captain Pike from Star. That kind of dates myself. Sorry. But so there's a little something to that science. I'm not saying, hey, don't pay attention to science or fully pay attention to science. Understand that man's understanding is continually evolving, hopefully improving.
Science isn't often exact.
Exactly. Did you like that when I said exact?
Yeah.
That was But so the point is, you should argue from a coherent political philosophy, not necessarily solely rely on the science, is my view, because this is a social issue, in my view, more than a science issue. Because you say, well, if we legalize pot, there's a potential for people to abuse it, especially, I guess there's some study with adolescents, and it affects their brain growth. That's not the right word. But we can say that about everything. I guess we shouldn't have. What was the latest thing? It wasn't spray paint. It was something I bought at the hardware store. And a lady, hey, for those of you, this is radio. I've got lots of gray hair. And the lady says to me, "Are you over 18?" I'm like, "I'm almost over 80, not 18. I mean, what are you talking about?" And she says, "Well, I got to ask you that because they may be recording this so that I can't sell this to anyone under 18." I specifically can't remember what it was. And I said, why the heck would you have to ask somebody, like, who's going to abuse this stuff? And she goes, well, they found out kids are actually sniffing it or snorting it or something. Right. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know there was anything bad in this stuff.
Did you try it?
I did not. No, my brain is already, the brain function is so low that I got no cells to lose. But yeah, so if you're worried about harm, is the broader point here is, well, boy, we have to eliminate almost everything. Mm-hmm. Right, because almost everything can be harmful to you if you want to make it be.
I can't think of many things that aren't harmful, as a matter of fact.
Right.
And directly or indirectly.
Right. So it's really about accepting or not accepting a certain amount of risk. It's not really about harm. It's about, because if you say, no, I want to be perfectly safe, well, I hope you've never have driven an automobile. I hope you've never even been close to a roadway because there's a certain amount of risk there, right? So
danger.
So people say that is my point. They say that I'm all for safety and security, but you're accepting, by and large, most people accept the same risk day in and day out that almost everybody else does. One just makes more propaganda about the safety and security thing. That's a whole nother topic unto itself. But so the point is, these things should be rooted in a coherent political philosophy, not in, well, the science at the moment is pointing us this way, so this is what we should do. Or in Ariana's case here, she does go later to point out some of the casualties of the drug war, and we've spoken about them many times, so I'm a little bored with them. I'll go over them very quickly. I'm just going to read her paragraph on this. This is, I don't know, about 2/3 of the way down in the article. She says, it's about time, as the drug war has been one of the worst domestic policy catastrophes in American history. The human toll has been staggering. Drug offenders make up fully half of our massive inmate population. Of those, nearly 28% are locked up for marijuana-related offenses. In 2012, some 658,000 people were arrested for marijuana possession, and fighting marijuana use alone cost federal and state governments $20 billion a year. And the targets of the war on drugs have disproportionately been people of color. African Americans, for instance, make up 14% of habitual drug users, yet constitute 37% of those arrested on drug charges. And there may be more to that information. This is Ariana's information. Right. I'm not telling you this is the gospel truth.
Agreed.
I'm just saying clearly she's on the right track here, that the costs have been crazy. And I think a lot of people don't even like to point out the costs. They just hammer on, well, kids shouldn't be taking drugs, so we have to do whatever it takes. Again, you have to do some kind of cost analysis here. Whatever it takes, really? So all of our resources should be spent there because it's a whatever. So people should be dying of cancer because there's no cancer research left because it's whatever it takes. Right. Again, that's rhetoric that people use all the time, but they either A, don't think it through or they don't really mean it. A lot of times I don't know what people's motivations or understandings are.
Right. So we're acknowledging that these could be hand-plucked numbers.
Yes.
That may or may not represent the other side, but form your own opinion.
Yeah. But the broader point is there are certainly large costs associated with this.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is I always tell the same old examples and stories. I mean, when people say, no, we have to fight this war because we can't allow this to happen, marijuana is bad for the developing adolescent mind, etc. Well, how are we doing now is the question. I don't know what $20 billion is spent every year, or 2012 it was, whatever her number was, I can't recall exactly.
Right.
So, like Friday night, you ever see a group of kids standing somewhere and you roll down your window in your car and say, hey, fellas, what's up? And they're like, dude, we just can't find any drugs. Really? Serious? Are you serious? You actually believe that kids can't find it if they want to? I think they can find it in a freaking heartbeat. And it's illegal, by the way, and we're spending $20 billion a year to keep it away from these. Here's a little news flash in Townsville. Prohibition doesn't work. I believe it's been tried on numerous cases, and I think it's failed every single time. So that's only one of my points. But so you have to have a coherent political philosophy, and I'm going to make the argument that's what Ariana does not have. I love that she takes on certain issues. I think she's on the right side of them, and a lot of times she's on the right side for the wrong reasons.
So where is it, Tom, that she doesn't have a coherent philosophy?
Because ultimately she believes you got to use the state to do this, and she secedes her authority to the state by saying we have to use them to create the proper situation.
So she's saying the state's system, in the way that they're enacting the drug war, is flawed.
Yes.
Okay.
She's basically saying their tactics and/or strategies, whatever, are
wrong.
Wrong. They're not, or ineffectual at least.
Yes. But
she secedes authority to the state because she is a statist, and she does believe the state should use aggressive force against people. It's the only tool it has, by the way, to do things that she advocates. right? And some of them are on completely different. Some would argue a completely different subject matter. I would argue they're actually not completely different, but right. When it comes to social welfare issues, she's very much on top of those things, that the state needs to take money from people to put it to what she believes is a better use. Okay. So she's incoherent that way and many other ways. Just go to Huffington Post and read her article almost every day. I think this would be interesting for you to do that because you now, I think, are much more keen to seeing this stuff, picking it out. But I cited you got to have a coherent political philosophy rooted in private property rights, and from self-ownership, et cetera, the non-aggression principle, et cetera. But the point is, the current system is incompatible with those things. So I think it's incoherent to say we got to use the current system to fix the current system. Well, the current system is incompatible with these things, so you'll never gain a free society that way. And now she did. I point out that she used the word decriminalizing marijuana. I like that word because people use the word legalizing often. I kind of cringe at that word, and that's one of my things is words. I kind of get off on that a little bit. In my view, if you legalize something, that means you're saying, well, of course, the state, I use that term generically,
says it's okay.
Yeah, they have the authority to determine whether it's okay or not. And my argument is, no, they don't. So they aren't in a position to legalize or make things illegal. They shouldn't be. I realize they are now. So I kind of cringe at the term legalize, so I just wanted to point that out. She had used the term decriminalize many times, and then they should, because basically it's saying we have no authority here. We shouldn't be involved. It has nothing to do with us.
You like that?
I do. And then originally I was there with the vices are not crimes is what I wanted to point out. Even though there are inherent risks, right? It's as Lysander Spooner would say, a vice is one of those errors that man makes in finding his own happiness. He called it an error. The one thing I also want to point out about Ariana is she's on numerous occasions held positions that were not really compatible, accepted, or acceptable by either party. In a sense, she's kind of a candidate to embrace libertarianism. To see that, right? And I think somewhere in this article, if I remember, she kind of points out that she was on this years ago talking about issues that neither party was willing to address. So she's kind of been there, right? She should see that the system, the two parties, the system is not working, but she's not fully there yet. She can't accept that. She thinks again, like that our Facebook thing, that we need to govern the people who govern us so they do it correctly. Like the guys, why would we do that? Why don't we just govern ourselves and be done with it? Right. It's more efficient. And then the last thing, again, I did this out of order, but that I had written down previously is that she cites the costs of the drug war. And I would commend her for that, because a lot of people only want to cite the things that they would claim are to the advantage, or if they're in support of the drug war. See, they had a drug bust. They got, $6 million worth of drugs off the street. That $6 million that our kids can't ingest, blah, 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 all that story. And I'm not arguing that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing that kids don't ingest. But the real way that you want to fight the drug war is, like I argue on everything in regard to liberty, it's through education and persuasion. If you do that, you will squelch demand for it. If there's no demand, the supply will go away. It will simply go away. And that's the way to fight this issue. When the demand is actually there, the supply will get here. The cost will be higher to supply. Right? They're going to send in 100 pounds of something. They're going to lose 50 pounds of it to the cops, to the DEA, whoever. So the cost of pot is going to be higher. The quality of the pot is probably going to be lower, right? Because they have higher costs in those kind of operations. If it were legalized, they wouldn't have those costs. And I heard some story that the price of pot in Colorado is actually higher than the black market stuff. Now, I don't know I just heard this from somebody saying that, which kind of surprised me.
For sure.
So who knows what's going on there. Anyway, but I just find Ariana sometimes very interesting because, again, like a lot of people, all over the map. And at some point, will she see that the current system is failing her? My guess is maybe no. I'd like to see it happen.
Well, the trick for somebody is that they need to find somebody that they listen to, that impresses them with some sort of knowledge or challenges them
Right.
on that aspect, like you have so much with me, to say, well, wait a minute, look back in the mirror. What'd you just say? Does that sound right? Does that sound fair?
Right.
And that's what we hope we get to do in this show.
Yeah, and even beyond that, eventually, and I think slowly Brad is there, his measure is always, well, this doesn't violate anybody's property rights. This is not an aggressive act. So what's the problem with it?
Right.
The guy can have that view, or he can want to do that. That's fine, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I was writing about earlier. Probably my next post. That's I have that I think that website's getting lonely, or my blog. So I got to get something on there. But I was inspired earlier this week to write something, and I've got something in the works here. Should be published in the next day or two. But basically about that is, the essence of law, and obviously I'm inspired by Lysander Spooner. He's a great writer. He was amazing intellect. But it's using that lens of, instead of what, was taught either through my formal education or from my friends, right, that I would argue just picked up through osmosis. This adds an intellectual foundation to the analysis.
Sure.
Right? There's a little something here. It's not like, well, I just think so.
Right.
There's why I think so is what I'm trying to point to on this show, and that's, I think, maybe inspire some people to think and go, maybe these guys aren't quite as loony as I originally thought they were.
And I'll warn you, once you start to agree a little bit that okay, well, something is the way that it is, then you can pretty quickly contradict yourself. That if you take the stand on the other side, that you go, oh yeah, wait a minute. So, keep listening, folks.
Yeah, I think many people think they can navigate without, what was Bill O'Reilly say? It's like he has no philosophy, it adheres to no philosophy or no ideology, or I can't remember exactly. It's been so long since I really listened to his show. But I'm like, I think you need to have some guideposts, some gauge, some scale, some measuring tools to go along with you. Otherwise, like you said, you'll find yourself, oh, geez, I contradicted what I originally in that issue, right? And this does that for you.
Or liberty, you can't use isolated circumstances and be in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You can't go, well, it applies to that, but I can't agree with it there because I really think that the way that it is right.
Many times I make the statement on the show that taxation is legalized plunder. It's theft, legalized theft, right? And say, oh, great. Well, if there's no gasoline tax, they wouldn't upkeep the roads, and we wouldn't be able to go anywhere. That's, I think, what Brad's alluding to. You can't do this in a vacuum. There would be much more to a free society than just getting rid of that one tax. That would affect roads. I would argue, again, roads would be way better off. Go read Dr. Walter Block. He'll tell you all about it. Yeah. With that, I'm finitoed. I wanted to wrap up there, unless you have something that you would like to share with us to really tie this in a nice, neat bow. I think we kind of already did that, but... Yeah.
I think I'm watching Breaking Bad. I'm
yes.
way behind. But I think if you look at watch Breaking Bad, and yes, it's fiction, and yes, it's probably sensationalized, it's darned entertaining, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But if you watch... that I think that this particular article really speaks to kind of what I'm viewing and how the authorities go to infinitesimal lengths to get their way to stop the bad guys and everything else. And we're not advocating for drugs. We're not advocating for all of the drug culture. We're not advocating for that at all. But it's pretty hard to not watch Breaking Bad and go, from a liberty perspective, to not find it to be a lot of what we talk about on this show.
Absolutely. When you said we're not advocating for drugs, we're not advocating, and that's where people jump. Usually if you say, well, whether you say it should be decriminalized or legalized, people go there, oh, so you want our kids to be taking this. I would just refer you back to the Stefan Molyneux quote. The point is, morally, slavery is wrong, he pointed out. It doesn't matter who picks cotton afterwards, right? Obviously, again, I tried to point out that the way to deal with the drug problem is through education and persuasion. That's what we're saying. That's the tool that should be used, not the use of force. right? So again, people misconstrue that. Well, if you're not for using force to combat the drug problem, well, you're obviously for taking drugs. I think that's an erroneous conclusion. Is my point.
And I'm gonna sound more radical here for a second, but if you look at the drug economy, if I can even use it in that manner, it has no authority, and so therefore I find it to be a true free market society.
It is
free market economy because it's defining and regulating itself. Yes, sometimes by force. I would admit, sometimes by force.
Yeah, we're not saying that all the people involved are angels by any stretch.
Right.
But neither are they, and not to probably the same degree. I don't know. Use your own judgment there. But in what we call the legalized pharmaceutical industry, there's some people that aren't. I would argue are not good people in there too. And yet they're not using the same strategies and tactics. One is because one's not pushed underground, the other one's above ground. And again, that's a big thing for legalizing things that, hey, the way you fight things out in an above ground industry is you use the court system.
Yes.
Right? Again, I'm not saying that the court system that we have is currently perfect,
right.
But I'm saying it's a much more civil way to quote unquote fight these things out, whereas the drug cartels tend to use those guns and bullets and that kind of crap.
Correct.
Blood and messy and dirty after that. I don't like that.
So those are my radical thoughts.
Yeah.
On all that stuff. It's highly entertaining television. I'm not a binge watching guy, so I'm only catching a little bit here and there as I have some downtime.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know that series is very popular amongst a lot of people.
It is.
And I believe it adds a lot of interesting wrinkles in that show. And it keeps you going. And I think if you have a little bit of a free society perspective, it's interesting to look at it from a different. You're thinking, hey, I'm watching this show, but I'm actually seeing it from a different light than how most people are seeing it.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting all unto itself, let alone the show.
Sure.
So.
And I find it to be. So
okay.
That's all I had to say about that.
Okay. With that, we're going to do. This is slowly becoming routine here. We're going to leave you with The River Jordan
Do it
tonight. It's kind of a cool tune. It's a local guy. We're gonna call him John because the last episode. Yeah, I haven't got to the bottom of that.
Okay.
But with that, hey, check us out next Tuesday.
Yep.
Same bat channel, same bat time.
That's right. Dating us again, Tom.
Yeah.
Are we gonna try to do the Supreme Court story again?
Yeah, we're gonna do that because anybody who's trying to listen to last week's show, don't.
Sorry.
Yeah. It kind of screwed up. And we're not entirely sure how this is working out.
Hopefully this is better.
We're going to find this out here in a few minutes when the show ends. We're going to try to play it ourselves and go, we did something right or we did something wrong. We'll find out.
So thanks for listening, everybody. Take us out of here, Tom.
Well, I'm going to take us out. And remember, next Tuesday, here we go. The River Jordan.
Gonna take it down the Jordan where the current runs lean. The river runs dirty, some things are never clean. There's a man in a camel skin on a bank outside of town. He baptizes some while others sink drown. God blesses some more than others, I hear. But I ain't never seen him in his long gray beard. Some call murder, others call it suicide. Some think it righteous when it flows a crimson tide. God bless the soldiers, every day they stay alive. Some think it holy if in his name they die. Boys, let me tell you that when cousins start to fight, an eye for an eye gets sanctified. Brother John's still out there on that river out of town. Can't you hear him screaming? The warrior wears a crown. He cries out across the ages in the same hoarse voice. Lone standing sentinel with a solitary choice. His flock spills a source that we all hold dear. But I ain't never seen blood make a river run clear. I'm gonna take it down the Jordan where the current runs lean. The river runs dirty, some things are never clean. There's a man in a camel skin on a bank outside of town. He baptizes some while others sink drown. God blesses some more than others, I hear. But I ain't never seen him in his long gray beard. I said, God blesses some more than others, I hear. But I ain't never seen him in his long gray beard.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening.